Welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire, Evan Ginsberg, and Dr. Mike Lano. So, lot of things. It's good to have us back together as a quorum because there's plenty of stuff to talk about. Mike, you're itching at the hilt to talk about the passing of one of the more significant names in professional wrestling history, and that was
Well,
Ted Turner.
a big, huge name on this Mother's Day. I know Mother's Day, you'll get into that because that was your idea. But uh, Ted Turner, I was very surprised. I don't know about you guys to see at the beginning of SmackDown Friday, they had the graphic. It wasn't anything, but it was something because of the war that Vince and Ted Turner had going back to the 80s. But this is a guy who's Ted Turner's passing, and there was an excellent 1 hour CNN bio, docu on him last night that was kind of hastily thrown together. But this is a guy who changed the landscape for wrestling viewing, wrestling overall. Many of us, whatever year it was, like 77 when he started the Superstation, might have been late 76, purposely got cable TV just to get Georgia Championship Wrestling. And that was, just worlds better than like I mean they were WWF before WWF. They were on cable and they were going from town to town, even like the Sheik's Detroit and Philly and all these places outside of the normal base of Georgia Championship. And obviously, like for example, every single newspaper, at least in LA, and I'm not sure about San Francisco, probably not as the cover, but the LA newspapers, the Daily News, even the Wall Street, New York Times, they had Ted Turner on the front on page one of these newspapers. And, he, I was at just one press conference and was able to take some pictures of him. But, you knew you were in the presence of a big wig player, and I'll ask Evan some things about this. But so he backs because he loved wrestling, and there's all this stuff with Jimmy Carter and his mother, Miss Lillian, that he got national press for that, directly, indirectly, and he backed Ole as long as he could. And then, Crockett came in when the second incarnation of Georgia Championship, like at 4 in the morning, getting aired, didn't do them any favors with Gordon Soley. And then the Crockett's thing started, and on A&E, they've got a 2 hour docu on the Four Horsemen, and they're showing all this great Georgia Championship on footage and all of that. And then Turner ends up buying and bailing out in like late 88, Jim Crockett Promotions, and now Ted Turner owns the wrestling company. He's not just airing Ole Anderson's show, but he actually owns the company, which begat and became in like late 91, early 92, World Championship Wrestling. And, the rest of it, the story of him allowing Eric Bischoff to do all those things, New World Order and everything like that. But Ted Turner, so many things. I'll go to Evan in a sec on this. Married to Jane Fonda, who loved the fact that he was a conservationist, like preserving wildlands and animals, and a guy who had the balls to buy the Atlanta Braves when they sucked and turn them into a real team. He even coached them just for one day when I guess they were in between coaches or the coach was ill, and just did a ton of amazing things. So I'm going to throw people to check him out if you're new and you don't know the full story of Ted Turner, how big he was. But again, he really started the whole cable thing well before USA Network started airing Joe Blanchard's promotion, before they got canned and WWF took over, whatever year that was, 83, 84. But Ev, what did Ted Turner mean to you? You like, I don't know when you might have started getting cable. Did you get cable TV just for that reason, like I got it as soon as we heard that
Um,
wrestling was on?
no, I hooked into it more in the 90s, more so than the 80s. for a variety of reasons, depending on the location, what was or wasn't available back in the day. It was primitive back then. Um, so during the so-called Monday Night Wars, it was must-see TV because you would literally sit there with the remote and go back and forth. If there was a TBS match that,
There were no
WCW.
internet spoilers. There were no internet spoilers. People forget that. When you were watching the Monday Night Wars, there wasn't, people spoiling it and reporting on it, or even now, I mean, when there is something big, you still have people from different time zones reporting it, so the people that are back time-wise don't
Well, there were
know
the
about it.
sheets.
Yeah.
Meltzer was having, spoilers like what's going on, like if they pre-tape TV and stuff. But the original Georgia Championship Wrestling shows with Wahoo, this was before Tommy Rich even became a thing. Wahoo and Ole was booking, and oh God, Ivan Koloff. It was just amazing stuff. We didn't have that, and that's why it was kind of so exciting, and you didn't want to miss it. In that specific time slot, it was always on the West Coast. It was 3:05, so at least you had your evening. But if you're on Ev's time, that was kind of brutal with a start time of 6:05 to 8. That kind of killed your Saturday night date night.
Well, here's my. Oh, go ahead, Evan.
No, I was just going to say it was very exciting because you would literally go back and forth between, Raw and WCW and pick whichever match was better at any given moment, and
And you
and they
never
were
knew who was
both.
going to switch companies. You never knew
Yeah.
on a weekly
I mean, when
basis who was going to.
yeah, when Hall and Nash showed up in WCW and Hogan, and they were cherry picking WWF's talent as opposed to now where WWE is cherry picking everybody else's talent for the most part. So yeah, it was exciting, and
It forced you to have to, didn't you? Did you do the thing, either of you guys, of watching one live and taping the other on a VCR?
I would watch them both live actually. That was my MO
But
because
that's brutal. That's tough to do, as I
Yeah.
understand.
So, but later WCW jumped the shark when there was 137 NWO members and their mothers. It reached the point where you could see they were fading, but for the longest time, those 83 or so weeks where WCW was beating WWF, those were great times to be a wrestling fan. Now it's like, I could go ages without watching WWE TV, or as much as I enjoy AEW, I don't sit there glued every Wednesday. Sometimes I watch it days or weeks after the fact, because it's archived. It's not as urgent to see it live.
So let me tell you my story about the Superstation. So in my house when we were growing up, we lived kind of underneath like two hills. So over-the-air TV was really hard to get in our house. So my dad, who was a legendary cheap wad, sprung for cable. And nobody on the block had cable. We're the only people that had cable. And we had 36 channels.
What year was this about?
This is like 1978, I think. So it was way ahead of
Well, so you got it. You got WTBS.
Yes, that's the thing. Okay. And when I discovered, first of all, my parents hated wrestling, but when I had this second sense, because it's not like now you have your programmable channel guide and it tells you if you want to search for wrestling, you just type in, wrestling, and it'll come up and show you where wrestling is on everything. Nobody told you when anything was on. You just discovered it because you'd be flipping the channels and suddenly you'd see it there. When I found Mid-South Wrestling at the time, this was before it converted over to the NWA and then over to WCW. The only way I can compare it is, okay, you remember the Bay Area was heavily in AWA and WWF territory at that
Well,
time.
they came and Roy Shire retired, and then they came to pick his bones. Mid South UWF. That
They
was Bill Watts. He ended up having to sell it
and they
to.
were, but they were never present in the Bay Area. You
They
could not.
they You're
They
right. They
were,
came into L.A. twice. I had to go down and shoot them at the
but
L.A.
they weren't on
Forum.
TV regularly there, and they never did shows in San Francisco. The NWA. I mean, maybe one show when
But
I
they did
mean,
a
it was.
couple at Bill Graham Civic. No, I shot uh, Hawk versus Flair title defense, Flair versus
But my
Nikita
point
when
is, when I
Nikita was
finally
face.
saw Mid South Wrestling, because I've been seeing just about only WWE, WWF, and AWA shows on TV locally, and big time wrestling when I was a little kid. To watch Mid South Wrestling was like the first time when you ate a spicy food and liked it. That's the kind of thing. It's the first time I saw Mid South Wrestling. I was like, that is what wrestling should be about. That is
Yeah, it's
crazy
gritty.
run
It's
stuff.
more believable, gritty and
It would
believable, and
the studio stuff that would happen, the interviews that would break down and turn into huge fights.
so
I
who were
was
some of the stars? What period are we talking about? Can you remember the stars or
Oh yeah,
matches?
yeah. I mean, it was early Jake the Snake Roberts taking on Terry Taylor and for the World TV title, and you had like guys like DiBiase who was just starting out at that point, and guys like obviously Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, and the early Midnight Express with the one with Dennis Condrey, and Bruiser Brody was doing some NWA stuff at that time. Abdullah the Butcher, early
So that
Dusty
was Georgia
Rhodes,
Championship Wrestling. You didn't know they'd pop in when they weren't in Japan. And Mark Lewin came in with
Kevin
uh,
Sullivan.
yeah, no. Lewin was there though with Abby and Brody. They came in for like two tapings of Georgia Championship, and it just blew us away. You didn't know who was going to pop in, or the Dusty Rhodes had two different surprise box
But
things. I don't know if
when I
Evan
went to high
remembers
school, I
this.
would tell all my friends about this, and they'd be like, "No
It's
way,
amazing.
this is awesome!" And I'd bring my friends over, and we'd have these wrestling watch parties, much to my parents' chagrin. Like we'd like take over the downstairs family room, and just sit and watch wrestling on a Saturday afternoon. My mom hated it. She was like, "You should be out there, running
But
around
did
and
you know that there was the Saturday show, which was
yes,
Georgia Championship, then NWA starting in
305
'85.
to
But then
505.
Sunday for a time was Mid South.
Yes,
Before
absolutely.
it became a best of, it was then later for whatever
Yeah, and
reason
you
they
never
got rid
wanted
of
to
it.
miss it. That was the point. And you go, well, just record it. But back then, videotapes were really expensive. So you like the family had there was like a dedicated videotape for the family. And it's like my dad reserved the first half of it for 60 minutes and 2020. Lord help anyone that recorded over those shows. So if I was lucky, I'd have like the back half of the tape that I could record wrestling on. And God forbid I would forget to rewind it or anything like that. So anyway, back over to you. I didn't want to step on that, but I did want to just talk about my first experience with Mid South.
Oh, no problem at all. I had a lot of respect for Ted Turner. He was a pioneer as far as cable, and more importantly, and rarely mentioned, he gave away billions to charity,
Yeah.
billions. And how many people and causes did this man help along the way? You don't hear all that much from WWE and TKO. I mean, they do help. They support the fight against breast cancer. They do charity, but I don't think they gave away billions like Ted Turner.
Now Ted
Honestly.
is a god in Atlanta.
Now,
I mean,
look at this. This is our local paper, and it started on the front page, and then it went
oh,
to this full page
can't really
and
see
a
it because
half
of the.
page on the front
Yeah, I
page.
learned
All
something.
Ted Turner.
If you hold the paper in front of your face, it'll actually come through. But if you otherwise, it gets green screened out.
Okay.
Or you headed for second?
I think Mike has mystical powers like Danhausen. That thing's like coming on and off and like through different
Yes.
dimensions.
Yes.
Wait, well, let me stop this because what was this mini Danhausen? Did you watch that thing last night, Evan, other than the first hour free, which I watched?
Yeah, it was this probably Mascara Sagrada or one of the minis.
Yeah, that's who he was. That's who it was. It was, and then they brought him in under a different name, but that was I think the original or the second Masquerita Sagrada.
Yeah, they brought him in as mini Danhausen, and the guy was great. He was doing one great move after another, and the Miz and his partner there was selling for him, and it was. I actually enjoyed it. I find Danhausen very funny and sharp, and it's performance art. Some people go, "Oh, this is just stupid." Well, it's performance art. You're not supposed to take it like it's Lou Thez and Pat O'Connor. It is what it is.
It reminds me of SCTV when Joe Flaherty was doing his what was the Count's name? I forget
Count Floyd.
Count
Floyd.
Floyd.
Yeah.
It kind
Yeah.
of reminds me of
That
somebody
wasn't
doing
very
that.
scary now, was it?
Very scary.
Boo! Yes.
Yeah.
I did love that character. Yes, and the 3D House of Beef. That was
Yeah.
There is and there were a couple of wrestling skits on SCTV, which was brilliant. But Martin Short's got a docu on Netflix that just started, and I'm going to recommend that to everybody. What a brilliant career! Lots of Catherine O'Hara and all of the fantastic SCTV was
She's
almost
gone. She was
superior.
great.
I thought it was better than Saturday Night Live at the
It
time.
was.
I
It
mean,
was.
because their sketches were much faster and they knew when to end stuff. That's the one thing that kills a lot of Saturday Night Live sketches is if they were shorter, they'd be funnier. But they usually they drag on past the point where you've gotten the joke and you're like, okay, you just they seem to like not know when to end sketches. But SCTV was brilliant.
SCTV, like Catherine O'Hara doing Lola Heatherton or her crazy character, or the Schminke
Or
brothers.
Catherine Hepburn. She was good. Well, you also had Martin
She
Short
could
doing it.
impersonate a lot of them. Andrea Martin, they were all
Yes.
outstanding. All of them, and some of them, like that brilliant 1984 SNL year. That's the only year Martin Short did Saturday Night Live with Billy Crystal, and oh man, that was a year.
He still made an impact in just 1 year. Absolutely, came up with that lawyer character.
The sleazy lawyer, or Ed Grimley, the nerd
Yes.
with the pointy hair.
Yes. Yes.
He remains brilliant to this day. And look at all the tragedies. CBS Sunday morning did a thing on him this morning. He lost his wife to cancer. His daughter committed suicide. He lost his brother and parents at a very young age. And you would never know because the guy radiates joy and happiness. He's one of the national treasures. We have a lot, but anyway.
Speaking of national treasures, I watched the last 2 episodes of the Hulk Hogan documentary, Real
Me
American. Last week we had only watched the first 2. So I don't know, Mike, if you had a chance to watch that documentary. I know you got a million
No,
others.
I will. There are so many documentaries, it's hard to keep up. I forgot about that. I still haven't watched the Vince one, which I forget who's airing that in like 4 parts. There's the Vince one.
Right.
There's the Hogan
I think
one.
that was Netflix too, wasn't it? I think that was also a Netflix documentary.
There's just so much content. It can kind of drive you nuts.
I know. It's
But so what did you guys think of the Hogan and or Vince docus?
Well, Evan wrote a whole article about it, but go ahead, Evan.
I had very mixed emotions about it. I thought for a film that was pushing him as a family man to totally leave out his estranged daughter. I shouldn't say totally, but she wasn't directly interviewed for the film. They had some sound clips of her, and
you didn't want to participate though. That's
okay, and to not address his son's legal woes and other issues, you're not telling a complete story. And as someone who makes documentaries or involved in documentaries 350 Days, Wrestling Then and Now, etc. Generally a documentary in ideal length is 80 minutes. This was this was 240 minutes, 4 hours or
Uh,
so. And it's not that they didn't have the time to tell a complete story. So everything you do in a documentary is a choice. So if your choice is presenting Hogan as my family is the most important thing to me, and you're not telling the full story of the family, forget about the wrestling. There's a hole in the core of the movie. I mean,
But they didn't say that the message wasn't that the family was the most important thing. In fact, they point out a lot of times that he wasn't there for them. He let them down.
but at the end of his life, he found religion and he came to the realization that family should have come first and not the wrestling. So my point is, there's all this footage of him being a doting father, a loving dad at home, and how sad they were when he'd go back on the road and they wouldn't see him for weeks at a time. So if the film is about him evolving into a family man and you don't tell the whole story of the family, it's an incomplete film as far as I'm
well,
concerned.
it's fake. But he did in there finally admit that during, I guess, the interview process that he lied on Arsenio Hall about not doing drugs or not doing steroids, which now he finally cops to, like right before he dies.
I mean, but that's the thing is that, let me take an alternative view on it. First of all, I want to say that if just for the music itself, it's a documentary worth watching. I love the musical choices for the show and the way they integrate the music to illustrate like the era, the time, the difference in time eras. And I do think it's also a okay. A lot of people are like,
So did
well,
they
I
purchase
think
original music? Is that what you're saying? Era music to
no,
signify,
yeah, they
okay,
went and they
this is
got music
84.
from, like stuff from Foreigner, and there's stuff from Kiss, and there's stuff from,
But what does that have to
AC/DC.
do unless you have some Cyndi Lauper songs to signify, okay, here it's 83, 84.
Because they're talking about what he was doing at the time. Hulk Hogan isn't just about Terry Bollea being a character in a wrestling ring. It's about what happened with America and our whole attitude, outside of just Hulk Hogan and our acceptance of wrestling as a culture and how wrestling made Terry Bollea into Hulk Hogan, and that there's that you even have who was the director in the fourth to start off the fourth episode?
Werner Herzog, one of the
Yeah,
great directors, was
correct.
talking about the importance of Hulk Hogan, and it was interesting because they should have had him direct this because he's directed some great documentaries as well as some great dramas. I mean, that's one of the world's
He's a big deal,
greatest
but what does he have to do with wrestling? He
He's
just talked
one.
about
He's a fan. He said
Yeah.
he's a big fan, and two, it was very interesting because they said, he's really Terry Bollea, and Werner's like, who's that? And he's like, that's the guy who is Hulk Hogan. He's like, that's not his real name. Is not his real name isn't Hulk Hogan. And he's like, I don't really want to know. He's like, all I really want to know about is Hulk
Wait,
Hogan. I
so
don't
so
know.
what other celebrities? I mean, everybody lies if they say they never have watched pro wrestling.
Well,
Who
there were a
else did they
lot
have
of
besides
celebrities.
Herzog, who was a big name you wouldn't expect to talk about wrestling? I mean, did they get people who actually went to WrestleMania 1 and were backstage, like Billy Crystal,
They
Danny
have Trump.
DeVito, and
They interviewed
who?
Trump for about he's in two of the
Well, we all
episodes.
know that he loves wrestling, and he had two WrestleManias at Trump Plaza and stuff.
As far as I know, that's the first time a president of the United States has ever commented in a documentary
No, no,
about.
that's wrong. Jimmy Carter, whose mother was a huge fan, and they had photos in like '76 of Jimmy Carter putting a headlock on Mr. Wrestling
He
2,
wasn't
Johnny
in a
Walker.
documentary about wrestling. He's not. Jimmy Carter wasn't
Jimmy
interviewed.
Carter was up front that Billy,
I
and
know he
his
liked
mom,
it. I know he
they love
liked it.
wrestling.
I know he liked it, but he was never
Abe Lincoln
interviewed.
wrestled.
Yeah, he's also not being interviewed in a documentary. So,
Well,
I'm saying,
too soon.
yeah, too soon. My point is that as far as I know, and I don't think Carter ever was featured as an
No,
actual
but
interview subject.
Trump is you're right. Trump is has
So
fully
that in
embraced that
itself
in
makes it
UFC.
a very interesting documentary to watch, even for those parts. Not whether or not you like Trump, it's interesting to hear what he has to say about Hulk Hogan.
Well, before I
And
go, did either of you guys watch the full Vince McMahon thing? Maybe we can talk about
yes,
that.
Not at all.
I did. I watched the entire thing.
Good, bad. Which one did you like better?
Creepy. The Vince McMahon documentary is the documentary that after each episode you want to take a shower because you feel you feel just like he's such a creep and such a dirty guy. And at the end of his documentary, they ask, what do you want to be known for? And like he lists off like a couple things, and then after the first two, like powerful, successful, sexually active. It's like his third thing that he wanted to bring up, and each episode.
At least Hulk Hogan's a likable guy in person. Very nice. He always said you get enough shots. He was a nice guy. I don't want to put the guy
down. He cheated on
down.
Linda, but he didn't sexually harass anybody. As far as it's never been alleged that he I'm sure in the 80s when he was partying up on coke all the time.
All the wrestlers were, not all, but there was X amount, as Evan knows, that had girls in every port when they were traveling. That's the way it was in the 60s, 70s, 80s.
And by the way, Mike and I interviewed Linda Hogan many, many years ago. Remember, Mike?
Yeah. She had her book come out. It brought her to the show.
She was on our old show, and her take on all of it was, we had nothing in the beginning, Terry and and I was loyal to him, and then he was cheating, and that was her take on it, and that's valid. As far as
you gotta feel bad for him. Bubba the Love Sponge, his best friend, is filming him, and then puts it out there, and all of
that's
that
in the documentary. That's in the documentary. So I do think, Mike, you should watch Real American.
I'll watch them both. I'm sure I'll enjoy that. If they have pre-WWF, like Hogan in Alabama with Beefcake, I'm talking 76, 77. Him maybe in Florida doing TV well before he even went to Memphis,
they have footage of that. I'm surprised they didn't get footage for pictures from you with all I
did. I had a couple. Well, not in that. I had some photos in the Von Erich two. That was too much. The 2-part total of 4-hour Von Erich thing on A&E. A lot of new revelations. It's really worth watching, but it's also gut wrenching. And
I need to watch that.
Each death. It was really. It's the best of many Von Erich documentaries. 3 of us have all seen, but it's very brutal, emotionally draining because you feel horrible, the suicides and all of this stuff. But there are some brand new revelations we never thought of, and I have a greater respect for Kevin Von Erich than I did before, Kevin Atkinson. I got to go, you guys.
Okay,
have
Mike.
a great show. But
all right, we'll see you next
week.
We'll
watch those, but everybody should really check out. Great season of LFG on A&E, and I'm not just pushing it because there are some aspects I don't like. But the A&E bios, I've got only one shot on the 4 Horsemen thing tonight. There's an upcoming Road Warriors, and then I had a couple in the Von Erich, but it's really good stuff. So,
all right,
I'll leave you guys to carry on, lads.
Thanks,
all right,
Mike.
We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Adios.
And
away he goes. There we go. So now it's just us.
Yeah. So let me just say something about wrestling documentaries that the average wrestling fan does not understand. We make documentaries. The idea is for as many people as possible to see it. A mainstream audience, to have a major platforms, singular and plural, pick it up, and for a film to eventually be profitable. Okay, So you make a wrestling documentary, it's not for a wrestling fan who's going to watch everything and anything wrestling related anyway. You want a mainstream audience to tap into it. So when wrestling fans review documentaries, and Mike was, sort of hinting at it as well, it's not, oh, I knew all of that from watching 5,000 shoot interviews. It's, did the film move me? Did it touch me? Was I engrossed in it? Was I, captivated? And I was moved by parts of the Hulk Hogan documentary. I don't want to spin it all as negative. The scenes where he's talking to the Make-A-Wish kids and the adults with physical challenges, and you could see he was moved and he was doing his best to, keep it together. He's talking to dying kids, sick kids, and you got a sense of the good side of Hulk Hogan, not just the
Well, and also
ruthless.
when he's talking about his brother,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
that's something I'd never seen him address, his
I
brother's
didn't know I didn't
situation.
know that whatsoever until I watched this. But my point being, you can't just judge a movie by, I knew all of, we got some criticism for 350 days. I knew all of that from the shoot interviews. Well, that was, we weren't
Yeah,
doing
but
it for the,
who'd ever seen Ox Baker make French toast?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
You can say all you want about what you've seen and what you haven't seen, but if you haven't seen Ox Baker make French toast, then you haven't seen enough wrestling, in my
350
opinion.
days.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I had very mixed emotions about the Hulk Hogan series, but all in all, I enjoyed it. I was involved in it. Here's a very simple thing that Ebert and Rope, Siskel and Ebert, I should say, said many, many years ago, 40 years ago. They said, this is how you judge a film. Must you see the ending? If you could turn it off in the middle, it's not good. It's not good. And I needed to see the ending of this film. I couldn't just, there's WWE TV. I'll turn off 20 minutes into it. It's like brain cells are seeping out of my head from the stupidity, and I just turned the thing off in the middle. This film had value to it. It had some very powerful moments in it. And ironically, as an old school fan who was not happy with Hulkamania and rock and wrestling and Vince turning it into a kiddie show and a cartoon and etc. so on, I was not a big Hulk Hogan fan, but as I watched the 4 hours of this, I felt bad for him because here's a guy who had all the success in the world, all the money in the world, all the women in the world, and he had a lot of physical, emotional, psychological pain, constant pain, and he was a hardworking guy. I mean, some of it was driven by greed and materialism, but the grind. I mean, this guy's surgery after surgery, and I want to get
Yeah,
back in the
the stuff
ring,
they
and
showed on his back was really horrible. I'd never
yeah,
seen that.
and
And yet, what you put together in The Wrestler, and the reason why The Wrestler is such a great film and transcends wrestling fans and people that just watch it on TV is that it talks about that story of why people can't walk away. And unfortunately, in my life, I was a friend of Crash Holly. Okay. We've had his daughter on the show. Crash couldn't walk away from wrestling. It had integrated itself so highly into his personality and who he was that he couldn't get away from it. And Terry Bollea could never get away from it. It just was, I mean, they make that very obvious that Hulk Hogan took over his life
yeah.
and he wasn't a separate entity anymore.
He
It
said
wasn't. Yeah,
he,
go
he
ahead.
said he said he only really felt alive in the ring, and we made that point in The Wrestler with Randy the Ram. His life, Randy the Ram's life was a mess, but in the ring, he felt alive. And Johnny Valiant said the ring was my canvas. I was an artist painting on a canvas, and teachers need to teach. Comics need to get people to laugh. Actors need to act. You identify as something, and Terry Bollea identified as Hulk Hogan and this larger than life hero, and it was a lot to live up to because the person wasn't a flawless hero. And there's value to this. There's value to the movie, and despite its flaws, I would tell people to watch it. Even if you don't have to be a wrestling fan. There's that.
No, because you learn about history, you learn about America, you learn about media, you learn about what performance art is all about, and how, I mean, you could really take Hogan's story and transpose it to a whole bunch of rock and roll musicians that, have almost similar stories to it. Maybe not the raw physical pain, but certainly the drugs, certainly like the money,
the
groupies, and money being there, but then not being there because of bad investments and people ripping you off, and legal issues and so forth. And sometimes these guys get, rock and roll guys are out late at night and then drive their limo, don't drive a limo back to where they go, and they take their motorcycle or car and crash it into a tree, or that sort of thing. Anything where you're involved, any career where you're involved in a lot of traveling has a lot of risk too.
I'm going to do an extensive piece on it for Pro Wrestling Stories, a review. All in all, Cisco Neba used to go thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs somewhere in the middle. I would say thumbs somewhere in the middle.
I say a thumbs up. I say a thumbs up,
okay,
because I think it's very well produced. Would you agree? There is that the production elements are top notch. I mean, Netflix did a really good job. The editing of it, the soundtrack of it, the quality of the interview itself is top notch.
Yes, it just had major holes in it, and it selectively told his story. How do you leave out almost entirely a second wife of 10 years? What? How do you just leave?
Well, because she doesn't want to talk about it, and she doesn't give permission.
Yes, but it's the job of the filmmaker to tell somebody.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do agree with that, and they maybe focused a little bit too much on like what happened in the WrestleManias and stuff like that, which in the end aren't really that important to telling the story of Hulk Hogan.
If you haven't told the story of a second marriage of 10 years, a son's, incredible difficulties in life, and a strange daughter, you haven't told the guy's life story. So,
because I think half of it is a historical thing, but another half of it, and let's be honest here, given his death, was a tribute. I think they were caught between both, wanting to say everything about him and wanting to give a memorial to somebody that I mean, it was only like 8 months after he died that they made that. How often do you interview somebody and unfortunately for your case, it probably does happen, but you interview somebody and then 8 months, within a year, they're dead. And so, I'm sure that influenced how they were going to spin everything, and they wanted to be less, like just beat the man while he's down. And also for permission's sake, these people would not cooperate probably if they thought they were going to be, slammed in the documentary. So they compromised.
Anytime you create any kind of art, whether it's a Von Erich's film, The Iron Claw, where they leave one Von Erich kid out
Completely out. There
entirely.
you go.
I mean, that's a major choice.
It
You know,
is.
I recently, Dutch Mantel's podcast absolutely trashed Johnny Valiant, and
Wow.
and they even selectively edited out a piece specifically on Johnny Valiant that 10,000 plus people have watched. You know that Johnny Valiant was a terrible human being. Now Johnny was a dear friend of mine, and the night he died was one of the worst nights of my life. And for weeks after, like I couldn't get him out of my head. That car hitting him, crossing a street that he had always crossed. Johnny used to sleep on my couch. I mean, Johnny, I love the guy.
You managed it.
So there's 10,000 plus people that think Johnny Valiant was a terrible human being because whoever worked on that show, that's the way they spun Johnny Valiant without telling any of the other side. So, I'm telling the other side right here. I could also tell you that Johnny was a tortured artist, like Mickey Rourke, and he wasn't flawless, but he had a loving wife and loving children and loving friends and fans that adored him, and you know, to just spin him as a dirtbag, like. And if you only watch that Dutch Mantel show, that's what you would walk away with. That's not telling two sides of a story. That's what an artist is supposed to do. That's what a
Well,
journalist
I
is
don't think
supposed to do.
anyone would ever accuse Dutch Mantel of being an artist.
Well, if you're doing a podcast, you're supposedly a journalist. We're trying to tell two sides of how
We do, but some people use podcasts as just a sounding, board to just say whatever they want and have no repercussions because they're not journalists. They don't have any journalistic integrity, so they say literally whatever they feel off the top of their heads if they think it's going to get people to click on it. And, thankfully, you and I do have the integrity. We don't just spout stuff off that we don't have any idea or any factual basis on. We don't just put things raw in opinions without any kind of like factual basis behind them. But that's Dutch Mantel is under no obligation to behave in such a fashion. Unfortunately, I think I agree with
it's
you.
valid. It's valid. Dutch Mantel could say, I had this, and this bad experience with Johnny Valiant. That's fine. But if nobody's giving the other side of it and it's being labeled that the guy was no good, in the actual text, when you're posting the clip, that's not a journalist telling two
No.
sides of a
No,
story.
welcome to the world of podcasting. I mean, that's the problem is that there is no, I mean, it's nice when people do have journalistic integrity, but there's absolutely no requirement to put up a podcast to have any level of integrity on it at all. It's just up to whether people click on it or not.
So a bunch of people responding to Dutch Mantel's podcast was going, oh, Bobby Heenan said the Valiants were no good too. And I'll tell you the Bobby Heenan story from Johnny's point of view, who told me. So Bobby Heenan's mom is in the hospital, and she used to cook for him, and she was very kind, and Johnny loved her. So Johnny went to visit her in the hospital. She was, older woman. She was sick at the time. So Heenan's at the hospital. His mom's in the Heenan's visiting his mom in the hospital, and Heenan's like, "Oh, Johnny, thank you so much for visiting my mom. I really appreciate it." And Johnny was a stand-up comedian. He was a joker, and he said as a joke, "Oh, I'm just here for a ride to the airport, Bobby." And he took it literally. He took it literally and held a grudge against him the rest of his life. So, I mean, so you're hearing only Heenan's side of it, but so Heenan's shoot at the view is viewed by zillions of people, and another huge group of people think Johnny Valiant was a bad guy and he was joking. Some people have dark humor, It's
And that's not really the worst thing someone could say. And it's not like, if somebody says one thing once, it's one thing. It's when it's repeated and it's something that you have other evidence to show their behavior. Well, I mean, in a way, like it goes back to the documentary where Hulk Hogan said that thing about Brooks' boyfriend who was black, and used the N word.
and
And
that
that
was kind of glossed over because you never actually heard what he said
it's
because
true.
that would have painted Hogan in a terrible light. So, I was angry and I said something and I didn't mean it. That's not again, I think part of it was Hogan was a charismatic guy with a good side to him as well. So I don't think they wanted to bury him, especially when he was buried. He was dead already. You
And
follow?
people loved Hulk Hogan, but the man who was Terry Bollea had a lot of faults. I mean, he was a regular, fallible human being like all of us, and in some ways more than us.
An interesting side to the documentary is you you see him. He's a struggling musician. He's a bouncer at a bar, and not all that long after, he's one of the biggest stars in the world, and that's a lot for anybody to cope with. I'm married. I'm married 16 years. I've never cheated, but I don't have women throwing themselves at me. What if you had that temptation? What would happen? What could happen?
Well, we
So
sort of have like, and it's not totally related, but it sort of is the movie Michael that just came out.
I haven't seen it
I
yet.
haven't seen it either, but apparently, it does the same kind of thing. It talks about the great part of his life, and they don't get into the more negative side of things. So it's not really a documentary. It's more, let's remember the good times kind of thing.
See,
And
an ideal documentary is the filmmaker has no biases and the subject is willing to eviscerate himself or herself and be brutally honest. And this wasn't that documentary, unfortunately.
No, I
And
don't think, and it's interesting. I guess, maybe Hulk Hogan and Terry Bollea didn't think it would be his final thing. And so, sometimes people are like, I'll give a true deathbed confession, on something, and they never make it to the deathbed. They die before they ever get there. So I think that, because you could sort of see there were still moments where Hulk was talking, and I think he was still having trouble like discerning, am I talking right now as Hulk Hogan or am I talking as Terry Bollea? And that there was that dichotomy that he was never sure of. And if a person's not sure of that, how can any of us know who we're talking to or who we're and that's the thing that I sort of felt that was, and maybe there's no way to do it, but it's like, can we ever get a chance to see an entire interview with Terry Bollea? You know?
yeah, I mean, Ric Flair at age 75 or 6, whatever he is right now, I think the real person is lost at this point. I mean, he's hard partying, I wear the bling, this suit is 20 grand, whatever. It's like he's morphed into the wrestling character at this point, and I think the real person, to a degree, is somehow lost. And yeah, when you're that famous, that consumed by your identity, your character, your career. Ric Flair was on the road 350 days a year. 350 days a year, the NWA champs, and Hogan probably as much or right behind them. So how do you not be Hulk Hogan after a while?
Yes. So we'll have a couple minutes left. want to have you talk about your experience on Blair Cody's Wrestling with the 80s show.
Yeah.
And just, he's one of our big fans, so I wanted to give him a shout out and say we're one of his big fans and talk about your experience on the show.
I recently did a 3-hour interview. Blair Cody interviewed me for 3 hours.
You could fly halfway across the United States, by the way, in the time that you had that interview. Just an FYI.
And it was an interesting experience because I've done, God, when the wrestler came out, I probably did hundreds of interviews at the time, and probably thousands over the years, but I've never done a 3-hour interview. It was like I was doing a shoot interview, and it was simultaneously exhilarating, exhausting, physically, emotionally, because I'm going over every, death of every friend, Nikolai and Johnny Valiant, and etc. So on, Lanny Poffo, and you're reliving all of it, and Nicole Bass, and but it was. I was going to say if I die, but of course it's when I die. We all die. You could show this at my memorial because this guy basically had my whole life on this show, and I was very flattered and honored. And he's a sharp, insightful guy who his knowledge goes beyond wrestling. Sometimes it's just exhausting only talking about wrestling. This guy knows movies and pop culture, and he's a good interviewer. Interviewers, what they don't understand, because a lot of them are weaned on Howard Stern, it's really 80% the guest and 20% the host, and Howard Stern flipped that. It became about the host and not the guest. So he's a good interviewer, great interviewer, because he knows you let the person talk. You ask a question and you actually listen to the answer. It's not a running monologue like Howard Stern doing his shtick. And I like Howard Stern because he's wildly entertaining, but it's not an ideal interview many times. So
So he's really a thoughtful guy. He's a big fan of this show, and he's always helped promote it. So I want to help promote his show. So folks, go to YouTube and check out Wrestling with the 80s and Evan's 3-hour tour.
And it's not specifically just on me. We do a lot on going to Madison Square Garden in the 70s and 80s and that experience. And I mean, it was a
Plus,
very
you talk all
different.
about your book.
Oh yeah. We were talking about Grindhouse, Odd House, and Wrestling Flicks, which is a deep dive into films of all genres, but also wrestlers in films and wrestling films, which I've been involved in, and the making of the wrestler, and also my other projects. And I was very honored and flattered that somebody would even take that much time to talk to me. And it's
You're the
it's
head
there
of
for
Nova Scotia. You're the head of Nova Scotia.
What's that?
You're the hit of Nova Scotia.
Oh.
Thanks to being on the show.
I would love to visit actually. As I get older,
Not in the winter. Not in the winter.
No. In the summer. I'd like to see many places in the world I've never been to, and if any of our listeners are in Orlando, I'm going to be there this summer. Drop me a message. Let me know. Maybe we'll grab some lunch or dinner or whatnot.
Hey, way to go! That's a way to get some free food on the listeners.
I'm not asking them to pay for me. I'm just being social.
Yeah, no, that's that. Hopefully, someone will reach
out.
And
also check out wrestling rings, blackboards, and movie sets, because that's where I really pour my heart out about these late wrestlers that I'm talking about. And Johnny Valiant's on the cover, Lanny, Nikolai, Nicole Bass, they're all on the cover. It's I love these people. I would sit with Nicole and just bullshit with her at the local diner. We were dear friends, and Yeah, she was special. I miss her. I could hear her voice. A lot of them, they have very distinctive voices. Lanny Poffo had a distinctive voice, and
Absolutely.
Lanny and Nikolai and
And don't forget Tiger.
yeah, Tiger Khan, who wrestled for the Hearts, and yeah, Tiger's dead almost 20 years, man, and I still dream about these people. It's like
I know what that's like.
yeah.
Sadly, I know very much what that's like because of the ghosts that inhabit my own mind, you know.
Yeah, today's Mother's Day. We both lost our dear mothers, and I dreamt about my mother twice in the past week. Yeah,
That's a very hard thing for me too. I wish she had been around to see my kids, and that's one of my great regrets. But for those of you that are out there and you do get along, if you do get along with your mom, you know, value the fact that you have her because one day you won't.
yeah. Let me just say something since it's Mother's Day. You had issues with your dad. This is normal. It's normal because we forget that they're just people. Your mothers and fathers are people. They have their own issues, their own traumas, their own whatever, and it's not going to be flawless. And for anybody who's estranged, I mean, short of sexual abuse, you can't forgive that, but or even physical abuse is very hard to forgive. But their parents are people, and they have their own demons. And if they're still alive, I would really recommend you try to, in some capacity. Forgiveness is a great virtue, and some people are better at it than others. I'm not great with forgiveness. People do me wrong. I've written them out of my life, but that's not a mother or father. That's a very different, scenario. And consider at least trying to make peace, because you might very well regret it if you don't. Also, I've known brothers who were estranged, brothers and sisters, and then one day you get that phone call that they're gone, and well, that any shot of making it right. I have family issues to this day, and I still at least try to iron things out in some capacity, because family is still
Well,
family.
family is a huge part of like the Hogan documentary. It's a huge part of like when we were talking about the Von Erichs. It's a huge part of so many of the dynamics that make people do what they do. And so, mothers are very central to all of that. And I know some very bad mothers and ones that were abusive and difficult. I wouldn't tell anyone to try to forget those things that went on. But for a lot of other people, it's stuff that just their mothers just go unappreciated because they just take them for granted. And if that's the case, today's the day not to do that. So,
And people can grow and change. With age, sometimes, not always, comes wisdom. So it's possible that bad mother, bad father, bad sister, bad brother, could be a different person when they're 60, 70, 80, and they see the light, at the end of the tunnel, and they're trying to make things right. Um, yeah, I've heard some wild stories, like, serial cheaters and abusers. They want to come back into their kid's life, and the kid says no, thank you. And you kind of understand it, but my point is, you could at least try to. It's still
yeah,
it's still
because
blood. It's still blood, and you know.
we see what a big dynamic it is in all the wrestling stuff that we do. Anyway, it's your hour is up.
Well, let me
So
let me just say one
yes,
last thing, since you
sure.
just brought that up. Many times the wrestling business and the indies are a surrogate family.
Yeah.
You're on the road with these guys and
Yeah.
women, and the promoter, if it's an honest, decent person, they become like a surrogate parent, and maybe it's a substitute for your deadbeat dad, or whoever disappointed the wrestler in his or her life. And uh, you're traveling with these people, you're struggling with these people, you're putting your body in their hands, and
Sometimes it's you
trusting
against
them.
the fans. Sometimes it's you and the wrestlers against the fans,
Yeah.
in some tough situations, And yeah, you do have to band together. And yeah, I mean, there's always a need for a family. Even people who say, I'm good on my own, I'm fine on my own. In the
I've
end,
heard I've heard veteran wrestlers call young wrestlers my wrestling son, my
yeah,
wrestling daughter. Yeah.
yeah, it'll create those kind of bonds, and they can mean a lot. They certainly have meant a lot to me. Anyway, we got to get going here, but another great show, and we'll see everybody next week. Oh, hey, quick, just let everyone know how they can get a hold of your book.
They're both my books are on Amazon. Just go to Amazon. Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Bodies, and Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Movie Sets, and Grindhouse, Odd House, and Wrestling Flicks, and you'll
Next
enjoy
time,
them.
next book, try a one-word title. That's my suggestion.
Well, you're trying to capture
I know.
different readers from
I know.
different
I'm just being
places.
funny because you've got, so many words in your titles to get them out to promote. It's like, exhausting for you. So
Yeah.
just, Slam. The next one, just call it Slam.
Slammed my traumatic life. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. No, not even Traumatic Life, just Slam. And then
Slammed. That's right.
everyone will have to read it from there. Anyway, thanks a lot, and we'll see everyone next week. Good night, everyone.